What's up guys, and welcome back to the Neil Dunn Drifting channel. I'm Neil Dunn, and today I'm going to take you through how I set up my suspension geometry. So the car is pretty much rebuilt, engine's rebuilt, and I just want to get everything pointing in the right direction to give me the best possible traction, steering and all that kind of stuff. So one of the first things I do before I adjust anything is I set up my coilovers. So my coilovers, I set the height on them and I set the spring pre-tension. So the spring is a 200mm spring. If you adjust the perches closer than 200mm, you're going to put the springs under pre-tension and you can stiffen up the car a little bit. I don't like to put any pre-tension on the springs, or very little, so I set the spring perches, the distance between, at 200mm. So there's no spring pre-tension. I also measured and made sure that the length of the coilover is the same on each side, so it's balanced left to right. The other thing I looked at was my balance from front to rear. So ideally you would do that with the digital scales. I don't have digital scales. You'll see my setup in a second is very, very basic. Speaking of which, let's have a look at it. So to do my suspension setup, I've got toe plates. Now the toe plates are more so for trackside. So the toe plates can be used to set the toe on the front or the rear wheels. More so for trackside, simply because it only sets one axle, if you like, at a time. I want to set both axles in the same plane so the car isn't crabbing. So while I have the toe plates there, I won't really be using them for this. I've got my camber and caster gauge. Again, I will be setting camber, certainly on the rear wheels, but caster I don't set. And that is because with the DMAC suspension arms, that's all preset. There's no adjustment really you need to do there. It comes out preset for caster, and it also is preset for camber. There's no adjustment on the top there. So while we'll look at what caster and camber can do, I don't need to adjust it on this setup. So I will be adjusting toe on the front and toe relative to the rear. I'll be adjusting camber and toe on the rear. To do that, as I say, I'll be using my camber gauge. I also have just a steel plate so I can stick my camber gauge to it. I have some measuring tapes and some string. And what we see back here, some bars for setting up this, mounting the string on, and just some stays for my stools that I use. So I have these set up that I can actually add those bars in, which you'll see in a few minutes, and set up the strings. Now you don't have to have that set up. It can simply be done with some axle stands and put the bars on it, but certainly much simpler to do it this way. So let's have a look at some of the theory behind what we're actually going to be doing. This is going to be kind of rough, but you get the idea. At the moment, the car is sat out on the stools. So if we look top down at the car, my wheels are somewhere around there, and they're sat on the stools. So around the stools, or what I'm going to do on the stools, I'm going to bring out the bar. I'm going to have a bar across it, there, and the same thing back here. So I have a set distance from there to there is the same as there to there. Once I mount my string along here and here, what I then have to do is just measure the distance across from the center of the wheel to the string on this side, center the wheel to the string on that side, and once I get those equal at the rear and at the front, then my car is centered within the string lines. Then I can start looking at my distance of my rear of my wheel and my front of my wheel, and if that's longer than that, then the wheels are towed in, or if that, which way am I going? Yeah, that is longer than that, then my wheels are towed out. So what difference does toe in and toe out mean? So if I look at the front of my car, let's draw that right, look at the front of my car, and I've got my two wheels. So direction of travel is that way. If I point my two wheels in that direction, I've got toe out. If I point my wheels in this direction, I've got toe in. So in a road car generally, you'll find that it's toe in. And the reason for that, as you're driving along, the wheels tend to pull back to straight, and it's better for tyre wear and better for kind of high speed stability. We don't want that so much in drifting. What we want to do is set some toe out. And the idea of toe out, when the wheels are towed out like that, it actually turns into a corner better. So on my toe out at the front of the car, I'll be looking at 3mm across the axle. So 3mm toe out on the front. When we come to the rear, similar idea, toe in, toe out. I will be looking for some toe in at the rear, and that's the direction of the travel. So the idea being, the more toe in that I put into it, the more rear bite that I get, the more rear grip, the faster it moves forward, if you like. But there's always a play off and a sacrifice. So the more toe in I put into the rear, I kind of make the car snappier and a little bit harder to control. So the rate to angle will be bigger with more toe in. So on my toe in at the rear, generally I set it somewhere around 6mm again across the axle, so 3mm each side. So caster, if you look at the side of the wheel, caster is from the kingpin at the bottom where the hub attaches to the top of the shock where it attaches to the vehicle. You're looking at your caster angle. So that's your caster angle. The more caster that you put into it, the more it helps to self-steer back. So if you see the driver letting go of the steering wheel, it'll rotate back in his hand, and it allows kind of for faster transitions and a little bit easier control, I think. As I say, on my setup, I can't or I don't adjust caster. It's set from the DMAC or the Group D arms, so I'll leave that alone. But the last thing I'm going to be looking at is my camber. So if we've got our wheel and it's kind of straight up and down, your camber is 0. I won't be using 0 camber anywhere really. On the front of the car, I'll be looking, if that's the vehicle there, I'll be looking for negative camber so that the wheel is pointing in. And again, I'm looking at that for turn in, so that as you turn in, it pulls the tyre underneath and actually flattens it out, especially on lock and stuff like that. So we're looking at positive camber on the front. Again, that's set on the Group D arm, so I'm not going to have any adjustment on that, but it's something I need to look at on the rear. On the rear of the car, I'll be looking at positive camber, and that means that the top of the tyre will be pointing out the way. So the reason for that is the rear suspension design on the Nissan. The fixing points or the pickup points for the rear suspension are at different lengths. So as the wheel travels up, the camber actually flattens out. So on squat, when you're actually driving and the car squatting down, I want to try and get that wheel as flat across the ground as possible. Again, it gives me the biggest surface patch or surface contact of tyre on the ground, and it allows for the most grip possible. So positive camber on the rear, negative can't spell. Positive camber on the rear, negative camber on the front. Caster is set. I'm not going to do anything with that. And a toe out on the front and toe in the rear. So that's the plan. Okay, now we understand what we need to achieve. The couple of things I want to check before I start. So the first thing is that the car itself is actually level. So I've a kind of a handy setup. I made these stools, and I made them with adjustable bottoms so that they can move up and down, and I spent some time leveling them from front to back, side to side. So once they go back into some same location, they'll end up level, so that's perfect. That car is level. The next thing I want to look at is that the steering rack is centered. So obviously when I turn from left to right, I wanted to have the same amount of lock each direction. So I have to make sure that the steering wheel is centered and the rack is centered, or the amount of travel is centered as well. So I've got the same amount of steering both ways. Okay, so that is 1, 2, 5 from the point where it'll hit the lock stop. So from the lock stop where it's going to hit it to, I'm just picking a random point, the outside there. So that's 1, 2, 5. And on this side it's 99. So we're quite a bit out. So that way. 25, 5. And that's 100. Okay, so that is going to be 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, and 1, 1, 2. Okay, so that's centered there now. You might be able to see that was quite a ways off. The car is now turning to the right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a new mark on the steering column. So I had one before. You can just see it on the column. I'm just going to put it marked lining up so I know that I'm bang on centered then every time. And then I'm going to have to straighten out the steering wheel and get that in the right location. I have the steering wheel back on, looking reasonably straight, which is a lot more than I can say about the front wheels. So as you can see, the car is turning right at the moment. So the next thing is to get the string lines all set up, and to do that I'm just going to straighten out the wheels so I can measure off the centres and get the car centred in the string. So just move that back to there. That should work, and let's get the string line set up. Just a simple part done. The frame just set up onto the stools, the 2 bars going across, and the critical thing with this is I've got little cuts. So I'll lay the 2 bars down side by side and cut it together so it's the exact same distance from one side to the other on both ends. Absolutely critical. So that needs to sit in that little groove, and I've got the same groove there, and I've got the exact same grooves at the back. So once they're in those grooves front and rear, then the strings are absolutely the same distance front and rear. So now the next thing I want to do is from the centre of the hub, and I'm just going to pop these centre caps off. If I can, I'll do it in a second. From the centre of the hub out to the string needs to be the same distance on the front, and then on the rear from the centre of the hub out to the string needs to be the same distance on the rear. Once that's done, then the car is absolutely square inside the strings. 220, 258, so 26, so that's going to be 24 somewhere. So there. Okay. So that's 24 bang on. And that is 2, 3, 6. 2, 3, 6. So 2, 3, 8. 2, 3, 8. 2, 3, 8. Okay. So front is square. Now to do the back, and then with the back done, do the front again. Check that. Might have to make an adjustment, and so on until everything is squared up. So this one is 2, 7, 3. Walk all the way around. And that's 3, no. 2, 7, 9. 2, 7, 9, 2, 7, 3. 2, 7, 4. Wrong way around. 2, 7, 2, 7, 6. 6. 2, 3, 9. 2, 3, 7. 2, 3, 8. 2, 7, 6. 2, 7, 6. So there we go, same distance between the string and the centre of the hub on the front, on each side, and on the rear on each side. So now the car is square between the strings. We are set up. The car now is exactly centred within the string. So as I say, the important thing is that this is the same distance across to the other string on both the front and the rear. And now from the centre of the wheel on the front is the same distance, and the centre of the wheel on the back is the same distance. So I know the car is square. I suppose it's important to have the string somewhere close to the centre of the wheel so that you're measuring on the centre, front and rear of the wheel for our toe. With the stools, it's quite simple, but I have done this just with that bar on axle stands and weighted down. So same idea, you can do it on a level surface, and if the surface isn't that level, you can always level it up with some little bits of timber and stuff like that just to get the car level. So once the car is level, the strings are centred or the car is centred, next thing we can do is set the toe. So to do that, my wheels are straight at the moment, but we know my steering wheel is not. So I'm going to have to bring my steering wheel back to the centre, and I'm actually going to get some bungee cords and just actually lock it into position so that the wheel doesn't move or doesn't move too much while I'm doing my adjustments. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then we'll go ahead and we'll start getting these wheels straightened up. So I made a rough adjustment. I loosened the lock nut on the tie rod and started adjusting the tie rod out. So what I want to do now is start measuring the distance from the the rear of the wheel to the string and the front of the wheel to the string. My ultimate aim is to have 3mm of toe out across the front axle. So each side is going to have 1.5. So this side is going to be 1.5mm shorter than this side. So on this end I have 1, 3, 5, and on this end I've got 1, 2, 7. So I have a little bit more to go. I want to get that somewhere to about 130, thereabouts. I've been up and down a couple of times just doing minor adjustments, and I have it there now that the measurement here is 1315 at the rear of the wheel, and at the front of the wheel it is 130. So I've got 1.5mm longer at the rear of the wheel than at the front, so I have 1.5mm toe out, which is perfect. The measurement doesn't matter, just that the difference is 1.5mm each side. So that's perfect on this side. I'm going to lock it, check my steering. I'm going to set the other side, and then I'll just do a final check just to make sure everything is hunky-dory. While it's not strictly necessary on the front with the Group D arms, there's no adjustment at the top, I am going to check the camber. And you can see on the gauge, maybe you can see it, there's readings here for positive camber, which I'll be looking at on the rear wheels, and for negative camber on this side. So you're just reading off the centre of the bubble, and each marking is 1/4 degree. So I'm just going to use this plate, and that sits up against the wheel. And I suppose the important thing with this, is that it is actually sitting against the wheel and not the tyre, because if it's sitting against the tyre it's going to give you false readings. So that's tight up again there. Pop that on there. There's a little bubble level just to level it across. So we get the gauge actually leveled across. A bit too far. Okay, so I'm reading there. Just a bit over, so about 4¼ degrees of negative camber. So that's the front end sorted. The front wheels are pointing forward. That 3 mil of toe out set, and everything is locked up. The steering wheel, I don't know if you can see it, but I can just see the little yellow band that's pointing up the way. So that's perfect. Caster or camber I can't do much with. Caster I can't do much with the arms. It'd be similar idea with Wisefab. You can go messing with them if you really want, but I find that it drives pretty good. Now I need to come to the back. So the back is just a little bit more complicated in that there's a number of different arms that need to be adjusted. So we've got, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it in there, that's my toe. So to adjust my toe is that long bar there, and that round bar is for my camber. So any adjustment I do on camber is going to affect toe and vice versa. So it takes a couple of fine-tuning attempts to get everything set up correctly. So I'm going to check my toe first and then check my camber and start making adjustments from there. You might have seen when I loosened the lock nuts, one was a left-hand thread and one was a regular thread. So the two of them actually unscrewed or untightened the same way. Made that small adjustment. Now I'm going to check the distance from the front of the tyre to the string, rear, or the front of the wheel, rear of the wheel to the string, and let's see where we're at. So at the rear, I'm at 150, and at the front, I'm at 156. So I've 6 mil of toe in now, gone a little bit too far. Need to bring that back to get my 3 mil, and then 3 mil the other side. So a little bit of fine tuning on that. Okay, so I think we should be fairly right there now. So 151 and 154. So that's pretty good. Not going to lock that up yet because I'm going to check my camber, and I may have to adjust the toe back to those settings again once I adjust my camber. Checking the camber on the rear wheels, similar idea. The steel up against the rim, level the gauge. Okay. So I'm reading there now on the positive camber side, and the bubble is about 1/2 degree there. So I want to pull that back. I want to get it to 1/4 degree. Am I going the right way? Don't think I am. Oh, maybe I am, yeah. Okay, so let's see where we're at after that first adjustment. And get her in there and level. You might just see me rock the car back and forth a little bit on the just on the tyres, just to take the pressure off the tyres. Essentially, when you've made an adjustment that way, it can tend to bunch up and you mightn't get a true reading on the alignment. So it just relieves that pressure and just get it set back to where it should be. So now I can see, don't know if you can see that, but I'm just a little bit less than half a degree. So I'm going the right direction, but I need to go more. I think we should be pretty close there now. Get that set in again. Get it leveled. And yeah, pretty good. Let's see if I can get you a bit closer. So you can see on the bubble, just on that first mark off 0, so that's 1/4 of a degree. So that's perfect on camber there now on this wheel. Now, the problem is, after adjusting the camber, my toe will most likely have moved. So let's have a look. So on the rear, 153, and front 156. So it's actually gone 3mm toe out, completely the opposite way. So now I need to adjust that toe back the way, and I might have to adjust my camber back again, toe, until the two of them balance out and everything is right. So it takes a little bit of time, but we will get it there. Okay, toe is back. I've got 154 at the rear, 157 at the front. So that's perfect. 157, 154. Yeah, 3mm. And my camber is still pretty good, 1/4 of a degree positive, so perfect. That rear wheel is set up. Just going to lock back up the lock nuts, check it again, make sure everything is hunky-dory, and then do the other side. Looks like we are done. Toe is set at the front. I've got my 3mm toe out on the front. Toe on the rear, I've got my 6mm toe in the rear. And my camber on the rear, I've got my 1/4 degree positive camber. So that's set up the way I like it. By no means am I an expert, so these settings might not work for you, but it's just a general idea of how to do it with the string lines so that it's all set relative to each other. I'm not an expert, and I will tell you that this is not going to be as accurate as a digital alignment. Never going to be as accurate, but it's worked for me for 6-7 years, so I'm quite happy with it. Those are the settings I use. They might not suit you. They're certainly not going to suit a road car. That car will be all over the place sitting on the motorway. So take it all with a grain of salt, I suppose. Some of the tools I use, didn't use it here, but the toe plate is essential for track. If you get a little knock on one of the wheels, you can set your toe back using the toe plates. Quite cheap, around €100 on eBay. Might get them a little bit cheaper. I got these off Mike Fitz and they're perfect. The other thing I use there, which would be kind of specialist, is the camber gauge, caster gauge. So that's a Joe's camber gauge on eBay, €150 plus delivery. Not that expensive for, I think, an essential piece of kit. Again, even just a track site just to check after a knock. That's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. I enjoyed making it, and if you have any questions, anything you want to clarify, if you don't agree with it, if you want to do it, let me know how you get on down in the comments below. Please, the usual, like, subscribe and all that malarkey, and thanks very much for watching. Talk to you soon.